So I see that we're now live. Great to have everybody here. I'm here with Dr. Heather Sandison. Heather, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Always a privilege to be here with you.
Always great to talk to you. This is such an exciting time because we're seeing people with reversals of cognitive decline like never before, and it's just happening. I'm getting more stories every day. I've just finished a paper actually on people who have sustained their improvement for over 10 years. So it's really exciting to see, and that's something that just hasn't been seen before. And Heather is the founder of Marama, which is a paradigm-shifting assisted living facility. I've been so excited about this since she founded it. People all over the world asking, how do we do this? How do we get to Marama? So Heather, if you could talk a little bit about why you set up Marama, and then a little bit about what are some of your experiences so far?
Yeah, so in 2017, I had the privilege of doing the training with you, and I came back to my clinical practice here in San Diego County in Southern California, and we were having great success. You know, it's sort of shocking to me how well people were doing, that they were regaining cognitive capacity, that their relationships were changing, their independence was changing, and certainly the trajectory, the expected trajectory of the disease process had been turned around. And I watched that over and over, and I kind of developed a reputation in this area for that. And so my patients were reaching out to me and asking, hey, where do I send my loved one? And I hear this story over and over again. It's usually an adult daughter or a niece, someone who really cares about an elderly person in their family and their network, who wants them to get the benefit of your work, who wants them on this protocol. And as much as they want to, they can't drop work and their family life and their house and everything else that they are trying to juggle and take care of. And so they asked, where can I send them? Where is there a place where the Bredesen protocol is essentially done in a residential setting? And so I looked around, and there were a couple of people that were basically giving lip service to the approach and saying, hey, we'll help you get to a Bredesen trained provider, or we'll offer a little bit different diet or encourage you more with exercise. But there was no one really doing a fully immersive experience in it. And I'm sure you've been in this scenario, right? I'll be on a diet and trying to not eat so much sugar or avoid alcohol or something like that. And if the person next to me is having cake and a cocktail, I want one too.
Sure.
So I thought, after hearing this a couple times, like, how hard could it be? Why don't we just set up one of these facilities and invite people to come? And so in March of 2020, literally the week before the world shut down, we opened Marama. And although it was a little bumpy, it was also just the biggest gift to kind of hunker down together, to have a small group of people, to really get the staff well trained and dialed in. And what we did was really create a family through that time. We were very, very fortunate. We didn't have a case of COVID until about 18 months into the pandemic. And even then, we kind of sailed through it, which was really nice. And I think in large part to the healthy lifestyle that everyone there is living. So the stories are plentiful. I'm happy to go into them, but I want to, just see if there's other questions coming up about the beginnings of Marama.
Yeah, you bring up such good points here. And I remember Lance Kelly and I were there at Marama right before it opened, right before the pandemic. And it's a beautiful facility just outside San Diego. Just beautiful views and such a great environment. And, I think it's important for all of us to recognize this is a paradigm shifting place, because all the time that, I was practicing and seeing patients and doing the lab work, we would see people who would be going downhill. They would go into an assisted living facility and they would take a nosedive. They would just go straight down because they had more problems, different environment, more stresses. They'd be put on medications to manage any sort of change in behavior, and then they would just go right downhill. So to have a place where virtually everybody is not getting worse, some are getting better, you actually have people who can potentially leave, and then you've got other people who are very stable for years so that they now have more time with their loved ones. Very exciting. And I was going to say, from the research side, what we see is that things are going parallel in two directions. On the one hand, we're understanding better and better what these degenerative diseases are at the biochemical level. And we're now, of course, there are new blood tests. So things like p-tau 181, where you don't have to do spinal taps anymore, which is a very exciting development. At the same time, we're all trying to make things easier and more accessible. And you mentioned that this is where Marama is is really important. And I want to come to one of your stories in just a moment, but I want to mention one of the big issues that people face is finding the right food. And so they say, well, wait a minute, you're telling me I have to do the plant-rich, mildly ketogenic with, organic things, on and on and on. That's, how am I going to put all this together? So I'm really grateful to Nutrition for Longevity. They have put together a delivery, KetoFlex 12-3 delivery meals, which has been fantastic. I've had it myself, really enjoy them. And they are plant-rich, mildly ketogenic, organic, et cetera. So they hit all the right marks to help your cognition. So Heather, let's come back to give us just one example of a story of someone who came to Marama, who of course otherwise would have ended up in a nursing home somewhere. And tell us a little bit about what you've seen at Marama.
Yeah, so one of the early residents to move in, her daughter lives up in LA. She was living here in San Diego with her husband, and her daughter started noticing that, somebody would come over to repair the sprinklers or something would happen, and her mom would forget they were coming. And unfortunately, the dad, her husband, was even worse off cognitively than she was. And during the pandemic, this had started to get scary. She was worried they were going to miss meals, that the house was going to burn down. She was starting to really be concerned that it wasn't safe for them to live alone. And yet the idea of them moving into a larger assisted living with lots more people was terrifying for her. So she thought, we didn't have a long track record yet, but she put her faith in us and had her parents move into Marama. And I actually reached out to you about a year or maybe 18 months later, because I was so surprised. This woman moved in and she, couldn't, my daughter would come and you could see her outside. And when I would walk in, she would say, "Oh, you have a baby. Is it a boy or a girl? What's her name? Oh, I had a daughter." And then she'd start telling me about her daughter.
Yeah.
And then she'd say, "You have a baby, right? What's her name? Is it a boy or a girl?" And she would ask, super sweet, totally kind, very inquisitive, but forgetful. And 18 months later, she says, "Hey, Dr. Sandison, how's Nadia? She must be about 3.5. Is she, hitting her milestones?" And I just couldn't believe it. And what I saw and what I mentioned to you was, I was like, she just keeps getting better. Like, how is this possible? I thought she would plateau. And yet her memory and her engagement, her daughter started saying, she started saying to her daughter, excuse me, "You've already told me that, Laura. Like, you don't have to tell me again. I know you're coming on Saturday." It was just so sweet and so cute to watch their interactions change and to see her just get that relationship back with her mom that she had really gone to become a dependent on her daughter. And she got some of that independence and her, just that relationship back. And that's really so much of the reason we do what we do, right? Is so that people get more of that time together in these really meaningful relationships. I do want to share, just because you brought up Nutrition for Longevity, this is part of how we support residents who are moving out, is we want to connect them with the resources that are going to make this lifestyle sustainable. You talked about patients who have had 10 years of sustaining the improvements in their cognition. And so much of this is dependent on staying with it, right? Keeping on the exercise habits, the sleep habits, the stress management, and of course, the diet. And I find that people have the most questions and the most challenges with the diet piece. And Nutrition for Longevity has just taken that out of the equation. It's so much simpler. And so we're excited to have that to support our Marama residents who are moving back home.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I should mention, for people interested in finding out more information for Morama, you look up www.maramaexperience.com. And for KetoFlex, it is ketoflex123.com or ketoflex.apollohealthco.com. So I'm grateful to Nutrition for Longevity, which has done such a great job with putting meals together, getting these delivered, and Julie G and Dr. Aida Lasheen Bredesen have worked so hard to make this better and better and better. So I'm really grateful to them for all the hard work they've put in over the months to do this. So, it's interesting, you talk about people getting ready to go home. Of course, in assisted living, you never see people who are going home. They're just getting worse. It's when are you going to go to the next level, the next level, the next level, until you pass away. And you start and you go through, not recognizing your family members and all these, the horrors that we know are cognitive decline, no matter what's causing it, whether it's Alzheimer's or vascular dementia or Lewy body or something else. So the idea of being able to come to a place where you may want to stay stable for a long time, or that you actually may get better and go home, is just so new and fresh. And it's just always great. I never tired of hearing these amazing stories of people getting better. So this is so exciting. So the interesting thing is, so many people have asked about this. They like, why isn't there Marama in every city? Well, now you've taken the second step. So tell us about the new Marama.
Yeah, so we've opened the Clear Mind Center in Wichita, Kansas. The partners there had, after COVID, had an empty unit in their facility, which is beautifully designed. So it's slightly different from here, Marama in San Diego. We have a lot of stairs, and we found that there were quite a few people, even though we want everyone using their leg muscles and keeping them strong, not everybody is in a place where it's really safe for them to be surrounded by a lot of stairs every day.
Right.
And so if that constraint comes up, the Wichita facility is really beautifully designed. It's a single story. It's very community-based. Their kitchen is phenomenal. It's just a really thoughtfully designed center that doesn't feel really like a facility. It feels very homey, and that we have that, of course, here at Marama in San Diego as well. But the feel is really designed to get people engaged with each other. We know social isolation is a risk factor when it comes to cognitive decline as we age. And so that importance of just making it easy to connect, to sing together, to exercise together, to engage in creative pursuits together, to play games. All of those things are really impacted by the environment that's created. And in Wichita, they had done a great job with creating that beautiful, loving environment. They have just phenomenal people working for them. I mean, I can't say enough about just Midwest kindness. They are so dedicated to caring for the residents there. And so when I met Chance and Matt, who are the CEO and in charge over there at the Clear Mind Center, they just struck me with how dedicated they were to your approach. They had read all of your books. They really wanted to know how they could implement this in their facility, and they had the space that was ready to take it on. They also recruited wonderful nurses, a really incredible staff. And then I had the privilege of going there in April to train them and to meet everyone. And then we're in touch regularly. We have regular meetings with them, and they really just embraced the whole program. And we have a handful of residents that have moved in there who are doing really well. In fact, we had one woman who had lived here in San Diego for about 6 or 8 months, and her family just felt like she was too far away. They wanted her closer, and they were in the Midwest. So her son had her move home with him, and then he ended up having a lot of travel come up and felt like he couldn't really dedicate enough time to providing this Bredesen approach for her at home. And so they decided to have her move back in the Wichita campus so that they can be closer to her and visit her more regularly. So that's been a really wonderful, and I just feel so privileged to be able to support their family in that way. And it's really, really nice to have her back. She's an absolute delight.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And I think, you brought up a good point of, actually seeing people getting better. It's not just fantasy. You actually document it. So you actually see improvements. And now that there are these new blood tests, it'll actually be very easy to see, okay, did these things improve? And of course, we notice symptoms improving. And we do have people who will go along and do very well for years, as you know, and then have a little slip, and it'll turn out, yes, there's a new leak, there's new mycotoxin exposure. One case we had recently was undiagnosed sleep apnea. So she had been doing well, but then started backsliding. Well, it turned out she had not been treated for her sleep apnea. So she could only go so far with that. So all these things are, really helpful for telling us, hey, how can we keep people with top cognition for a long time? And one of the other things that comes up is people will come in and they have a whole family of people who may be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who are thinking, but what about me down the road? And so I always tell people, look, it's important that you should be the first generation. Your generation, Heather, should be the first generation that should not fear Alzheimer's. My generation, that was the biggest fear. You're going to lose your mind. And it's been a huge problem. And people have told us over the years, there's nothing you can do to prevent, reverse, or delay. Well, that's changed. And so I encourage everybody, as that's in the family, 35, 40, right in there, get a cognoscopy, find out where you stand. Let's get everybody on active prevention. So dementia will be a rare problem. And again, when you go to most of these places, most of these assisted living facilities, they don't say, hey, everyone should be checked. Let's make sure that nobody else ever gets this. They're just saying, we gave your family member Haldol or something just to quiet them down, or Seroquel or what have you, which unfortunately, many people end up saying, gee, they seem to be more like a zombie now. So one of the things I've seen with Marama is people having fun, people, doing things that they enjoy, interacting, and of course, most importantly, keeping their cognition excellent. So tell me, with the facility in the Clear Mind in Kansas, how many people does that hold?
Yeah, so we have space for 14 residents there.
Okay.
We have space for 12 here in San Diego. So these are still just a drop in the bucket,
Yeah.
right? People reach out all the time and say, we need one in our city, because I understand no one would want to move their family member, their loved one, across the country. And yet that's what we have now. And so I'm so grateful to the pioneers who are taking advantage of this opportunity, and also paving the way for people who are going to come after them, so that we can have a Marama-like facility in every major city, so that you don't have to be visiting a loved one a plane ride away. It can be down the block. So that is, of course, our hope over time. And as you mentioned, what we expect is typically when someone moves into senior living, they go downhill. And we've seen that a couple times when, for whatever reasons, constraints come up and people again want their loved ones closer. When they move from Marama into a different senior living facility, there's a doctor we work with here, Dr. Howard in San Diego, and he was mentioning that, when he moved in, he was able to get off of his antihypertensives, off of his metformin for diabetes. He was able to get off of his antidepressants, and was doing so great, not just cognitively, but also the side effect of this approach is that blood sugar and mental health and blood pressure all improve. And fall risk, people are stronger and better conditioned. And all of these things are really, this is what we want, are the joy in that last chapter of our lives. And that Dr. Howard contacted me and said, hey, Heather, you wouldn't believe this, but he's in a conventional senior living facility now, and he's back on the antidepressants. He's back on the metformin. He's back on the antihypertensives. And although it was kind of deflating, I was like, wow, it proves that what we're doing really does have this impact. There's this ripple beyond just cognitive function. And I hope that people will see this. And even if you're not suffering with cognitive decline, as you mentioned, prevent. It's so much easier. My hope would be that people wouldn't need a place like Marama, that we could make senior living obsolete in and of itself, and people could live these really healthy lives at home through using this lifestyle approach.
That's a good point. And that's another thing that you have founded, which is Marama at Home. So excuse me, tell us a little bit about Marama at Home.
Yeah, so I get that, nutrition for longevity is making this so much easier on all of us. I get that not everyone wants senior living. Most people, if you gave them the choice, they would say, no, please keep me at home in the fabric of my community with my loved ones. And so the goal is really to give everyone the resources. As you mentioned, your book is amazing. And so many people come to me and say, I did this and we got benefit. And I want to just put the icing on the cake with a little bit more support, a little bit more coaching around the different pieces. It can feel overwhelming, even for people with full cognitive capacity, to imagine changing their exercise routine, changing up their diet, changing up how, wearing a CPAP, or getting to all the sleep medicine appointments even. All of these pieces are challenging sometimes to prioritize and get through. And yet the payoff is so incredibly worth it. And so my life is basically dedicated to making this easier, more approachable, and as seamless as possible for people to implement in their lives.
Yeah, I think Marama at Home is another thing that's going to spread and going to be very, very exciting. And, people will say, well, how can you do this? Because everyone tells us it can't be done. But what the research has shown over the years is that the fundamental nature of this degenerative process in Alzheimer's disease is really about two main items. It's about energetics, so things like mitochondrial function, blood flow, oxygenation, ketone level, all that. And it's about ongoing inflammation, basically activating your immune system, the innate part of the immune system, and keeping that memory where you're basically you got a hair trigger. Anything that comes in, you're going to over respond to it. And so, as long as you improve those energetics and reduce that ongoing, find what's causing the inflammation, reduce it, people tend to get better. And it's wonderful to see whether they do it at Marama at home, whether they do it at Clear Mind, whether they do it at Marama. So let's talk a little bit about where things are headed. I know it sounds like you do have some openings now at Marama, a rare event, so it's a great timing to talk. And you do have some openings at Clear Mind, a few, I guess, at both places. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. That we had a wait list here in Vista in California for about 2 years. And
Yeah,
we went through some remodeling recently. We got a little facelift. And on the back end of that, we have some space available. So if anyone
great.
is interested, please go to maramaexperience.com/apply. And we're just so looking forward to welcoming the next round of guests there, and also at the Clear Mind Center. It's always fun. I'm going to head over there this afternoon, and I can't wait because I get to have dinner, and the food is just absolutely spectacular. We had residents recently tell us they have eaten at 5-star restaurants around the world, and that Marama was one of the best restaurants they ever ate at.
Wow.
So fun stuff happening.
I'm checking into Marama. I'm for the
Well,
food.
you are welcome anytime.
So tell me, okay, so if I start having some cognitive problems and I ended up going to Marama, tell me about a day. Tell me about my tomorrow. What would that look like at Marama?
Yeah, so breakfast is at 8, an organic ketogenic breakfast. And we definitely support people with food allergies. So, let us know if somebody has an egg or a dairy or something coming up.
Yeah.
Vegetarians, we support that. And then after breakfast, an organic ketogenic breakfast, there's typically a walk, and that's done as a community. We like to have people identify birds or plants, kind of get engaged cognitively, and also connect with each other. When we get back from the walk, there's typically a meditation. The Kirtan Kriya meditation has a lot of literature data supporting
Yeah.
the benefits for not only for people suffering with cognitive decline, but also for care partners who might be suffering at home. We know that care partners are at higher risk of developing dementia later on in life. And so we actually ask all of our caregivers at Marama to stop. There's always dishes to be done. There's always laundry to fold, but just stop
Yeah.
and do the meditation with our residents there. And it really changes the energy in the room, changes the course of the day. After meditation, there's either a snack, again, an organic ketogenic snack, sometimes a green juice or deviled eggs or some guacamole, some kind of, again, organic ketogenic snack. And then typically we move into a creative experience. So something around the holidays, typically they'll probably start painting pumpkins soon, or creating gifts for their family members around Christmas or the holidays. They'll do bath bombs around Valentine's Day. We've got seasonal things that we do,
Yeah.
painting and sculptures. After lunch, the residents often will go into the more of an active physical activity. We have what we call this casita, which is kind of a biohacking circuit, but also more strength training and more cardio exercise. So we use contrast oxygen therapy. I know you're a fan of katsu. We also have saunas. We have rebounders, or the mini trampolines that can help, again, with a cardiovascular or aerobic exercise, but also detox and lymphatic flow. We've got a biomat down there that can really help as people are aging. Sometimes they become hunched and the muscles can be much more tense. And so getting on a warm mat, a warm, firm mat, can help to elongate the muscles. And we find that they're standing straighter and feel calmer. We also use red light therapies like the V light or the Juve light to help. And oh gosh, I'm sure there's more. After the casita, we typically move into the dinner time. So getting ready for dinner, again, organic and ketogenic every time.
Yeah.
And after dinner, it's a really easy time for a lot of people. They'll notice, if you think of your routine at home, you might just flip on the TV. It's a very easy thing to do to kind of check out at the end of the day. We encourage the residents to participate in a sing-along or play games. Bananagrams or Uno are some of the favorites at Marama, but we've got Scrabble and chess, depending on where people's cognitive capacity is. And so we really encourage them to stay engaged rather than checking out. Of course, everybody has times when they need a nap and they need to do a little less, but for the most part, we want to have an experience available and that they're encouraged to participate in. And then we honor the fasting for 3 hours between that last bite of food and when they get into bed. So nice, relaxing herbal teas and things like that instead of a midnight snack or a sweet treat in the evenings. So the whole day is really designed around optimizing cognitive function and really choosing our activities, our meals, everything that we do there so that it's brain healthy. That's the idea.
Yeah, very good point. And, we're just starting the clinical trial, as you know, at 6 different sites. And interestingly, Dr. Toops, one of the physicians, just pointed out that of her first 5 patients, 4 of them very clearly had mycotoxin exposure. So many people will say, how do I get away from this? How do I find a place? If I go to work, there may be exposure. If I go on a plane, there may be exposure. What do I do? So I think it's important to point out, you have looked at this very carefully. Marama does not have mycotoxin exposure, so that there's at least one place where people can go and make sure that they're not going to get exposure to these biotoxins.
I had a patient this morning. I'll just share. She's not living at Marama, but she's at home. She also has MS, and she came to me in May of 2022 with a MoCA score of 21. And today her MoCA score is 27. And her mycotoxins are off the chart all of a sudden. So she has gotten better and better. She got her, I know this starts to get confusing for people, but I'm going to break it down. So 21 in May of 2022 was her MoCA score, which was measurable cognitive impairment. Yeah. She got her dental work done with a biological dentist. She did nutritional IVs. We treated her gut aggressively. She also remediated her whole home. And she has gotten so much better. Her gait is better. Her energy is better. So many things are better. And yet her mycotoxins are very, very high right now, some of the highest I've ever seen. So we're aggressively looking for where they came from. And I am celebrating her resilience to that exposure today, because she's been on the diet. She's been getting the exercise. She's been wearing her CPAP. She's been checking all the other boxes. So when that came up, of course, we're going to deal with it. We're going to take care of it. But she was still resilient enough to have that improved cognitive function and energy.
It's very interesting because one of the things that's come up is people will improve when you just hit their metabolism, make them insulin sensitive, make them metabolically flexible, make them non-inflammatory, all these things, and they do very well. And then in the long run, if you don't get rid of some of the toxins, they will now have a kind of a secondary beginning to decline. But now you get rid of the toxins and they just keep getting, just as you said earlier, just better and better and better. So this really does come down to, our brains are relatively resilient, and you've got to do a lot to make it so that you're not thinking properly. You're beginning to lose synapses. But once you have that resilience, you have the ability to just get better and better and better. So it's exciting to see. This is not something that's just one thing. It's typically multiple things. And so as you deal with each one, people will get better and better. So great story to hear. And many people, as you know, they start to show all these toxins when they are finally able to detox them better. And so you should be able to help her with detoxing and get her even better. So that's exciting to see. So you've got now, obviously, you've got the second one that's opened up, the second Morama, Clear Mind in Kansas. Where is the third Morama? Do you know yet? Are you planning for others? We need 100 of these. As you say, we need one in every major city. Can you tell us anything about the future?
Well, I'm really excited. This is such a really wonderful time. I hope that you're going to share the recruitment link for everyone, because the clinical trial you guys are doing is just so important. It has that control arm. And so that will show more causal connection. And I really think that that's going to be what helps us get to the next stage of spreading the word. Really, I think like you, my life's work is letting people know that this is an option, that you can do something about cognitive decline, so that for the next generation, Alzheimer's is optional. And yes, I want Marama to grow. And I hear from people once or twice a week, I hear from someone that says, I want to start something like Marama. Can you help me? And so right now, and this may change, but right now our plan is to get, the second facility up and running, and then hopefully create a franchise opportunity for people. I know that there's so many people who are dedicated to this cause, who are caring and loving and wonderful, who can do a really good job providing this in their community. And so I want to be able to support all of the people who are reaching out. Right now, I don't have the bandwidth to like
Right.
create them all over the place. But what I think we have done a good job systematizing what we're doing, creating, the recipes and the procedures for in the casita in that biohacking circuit. And we see the results. We see people getting better. So I'd love to be able to support others in opening something similar.
Yeah, I think this is a great point because the more quickly you can get these up in multiple cities, the more people that can be helped by them. I think that's really important. And you mentioned the trial that we're doing. Thank you for that. And actually, Lance has put here in the chat, dementia reversal trial. This is at 6 different sites. It's in Hollywood, Florida. It's in Nashville, Tennessee. It's in Cleveland, Ohio, Sacramento, California, East Bay of the Bay Area in San Francisco, and then also in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. So very excited about that. The first patients are already coming through, and I think that will be very exciting. So
I wanted to share with everyone what a phenomenal and special opportunity it is if you live near one of those sites and you know someone who is suffering with cognitive decline. Being one of these study participants is a really, really fantastic opportunity to work with some of the best people who have been trained by Dr. Bredesen and get the benefits of this approach. They are so dedicated, such wonderful providers, and you would be contributing so much to what we understand and know about serving those with dementia. So please click on that link and sign up for the trial if it works for you and your loved ones.
yes, thank you, Heather. And then, as I mentioned earlier, one of the directions that we're taking is to ask, okay, what do we do now for other neurodegenerative conditions? The research suggests that each of these conditions is fundamentally an insufficiency in a subnetwork in the brain. So, you have a whole network that's there for neuroplasticity, and that's what's not supported enough in Alzheimer's. You have one that's there for motor modulation, for fine movements, and that's what's going down in Parkinson's disease. You have another one that's for more motor power, and that's what goes down in ALS. You have one, of course, that supports your macula and for fine vision, and that's what goes down in macular degeneration, and on and on. And so the idea is, let's adapt this. In each case, it's going to be different things. There are different specifics biochemically and genetically for each of these. And so we've been looking at how do we get this started for all of these others. And so very enthusiastic now, the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, which is right there in Santa Monica, will be opening the first precision medicine program for neurodegenerative disease. And this should be around the first of the year or so. So we're just setting this up. I've just signed on with them, with Dr. David Merrill and Dr. Dan Kelly, who runs the Pacific Neuroscience Institute. So again, I think that we're now going to have a place for people to go for initial evaluation, a place for people to go for assisted living, all sorts of things they can do to continue, and then all sorts of prevention approaches so that together we can really make dementia and ultimately other neurodegenerative diseases rare problems. I mean, they should be rare problems. We've had so much of this. Of the currently living Americans, about 45 million of us will die of Alzheimer's if we don't do something about it. So, okay, we are doing something about it. And hopefully we can really, I'd love to see that number get very, very low. And so it sounds so let's talk a little bit about your day today. So I know you've got lots of things going on. What do you typically do now? Are you seeing people as they're entering Marama? Are there other physicians who are seeing them? How are you getting them started and kind of on this plan?
Yeah, so I partner with several other physicians who have been trained by you to support all of the residents who move into Marama. And I still see patients at my clinical practice here in San Diego. And so this morning I was seeing patients there. I'm joining you from home on my way out to Marama to meet with 2 of the daughters who both have their dads living at Marama at the moment. And so we're going to have dinner over there together, just connect and make sure that their loved ones are getting the best possible support that they can to get the most out of their experience while they're there. So that's what my day looks like today. I just wanted to share that, like, having a place in LA to come to get this work up is so incredibly important. I think that this whole conversation about how can we support people in where they are, every family has a unique dynamic in terms
Yeah.
of where they live and what they have access to and whether or not there's a provider nearby that's been trained, and having a central location to come to and collect that data and then share that with the world is just this is such an exciting time. And I feel so privileged to be a part of this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe tell us a little bit about uh, how you chose the place where this is going to be, and then how did you identify the people? I mean, you've got a magnificent team there. How did you put this together?
I feel so fortunate and guided. So many people have shown up because of our network. I think you and Lance and everyone on your team has put it out there when I'm looking for people, and through Facebook, through Instagram, through the social networks, and through email, people have really come to us. And I think it's because they believe in what we're doing. They see the need. They see that there's work to be done in this space, and that there's hope, and that they can support and reduce the suffering that other people are experiencing due to Alzheimer's. And so the right, amazing people keep showing up. I can't really explain it. I feel so lucky.
Yeah, that is
Caregivers,
fantastic.
I read this morning, there are 11 million caregivers, unpaid caregivers supporting someone with dementia. And as I mentioned earlier, they are at higher risk for developing dementia over the
Right.
course of their lives compared to those who are not caregivers. And I want to really speak to that group today in terms of getting the prevention and working with Apollo to get the labs done wherever you are, getting on the pre-code program, just so critically important for that group of people. It's wild to me. 11 million people in the US is like more than the entire number of doctors and healthcare
Yeah.
providers in the US. These are just astounding numbers. And I want to get them support. I feel like I know you're going in the direction of like more of the neurodegenerative diseases. And I just want to bring in all the caregivers into our
Yeah.
world and make sure that they're getting the support they need. I feel like that's my version of expansion, is getting them in for prevention. So do you mind just sharing about pre-code and how that's different from recode?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And people who are at high risk are people with, Alzheimer's in their family, and people who have played football or have played any sports that involve the head, soccer, volleyball, anything where you're getting hit, you are at risk. Who've had an auto accident, you are at risk. If you're over 40, you are at risk. So there are all these things. And this is why I encourage everyone, please, get a cognoscopy, see where you stand. And actually, the idea of pre-code came from Julie G years ago when we were setting up Recode. She said, well, what about people who are fine, but they just want to get on active prevention and they don't necessarily want to have to work with a physician? Is there some way just to check the basics and see where you stand and then get you on an active program? And that's why we created Precode. So Precode is for prevention of cognitive decline, hence the name. Recode is for reversal of cognitive decline, hence the name. And again, we encourage everybody to get evaluated, to get on these things. And I think it's important to point out that you go through these 4 phases when you develop, just as it used to be that you had diabetes or you didn't, then they realized, well, there's pre-diabetes, then there's insulin resistance before that, and then there's some metabolic abnormalities very early. So you can really see that's the one advantage we have over these complex chronic illnesses. With Alzheimer's, you also go through 4 phases. You have an asymptomatic phase where you can already see changes in blood, changes on PET scan, changes in spinal fluid. Then you go through this SCI, subjective cognitive impairment, which lasts on average 10 years. And this may be occurring in your early 30s. And during that time, there's something not quite right, but you're still able to score normally. Then the 3rd phase is called mild cognitive impairment. And that's unfortunate, the term mild, because there's nothing mild about it, as many of the people who have it will tell you. And then it's just that 4th phase where you actually are losing activities of daily living. So Heather, I wanted you to actually weigh in on this, because people will often say to me, well, this person's probably too far along, but I know you've had people at Marama who actually do very well, who have started relatively late in the process.
Well, I've shared with you, I learned the hard way to never tell anyone there isn't hope, because
Yeah.
I have watched just things I had been told were impossible happened multiple times. Where one of my very first patients, she came in with a MoCA score of 2, nearly nonverbal. She could answer questions with yes or no, but I could ask her, what did you have for dinner last night? And I could see that she understood the question, but by the time she was trying to put together words, she'd forgotten what the question was.
Yeah.
Just 7 weeks after I first saw her, her MoCA score had improved to a 7 from a 2. And that was when it really hit me just how many people could be served by this
Yeah.
approach. Because if that was possible for her to recover, she was now speaking in sentences. She was bickering with her husband about things that had happened, on the way to the visit. She was just a different person. And
Right.
if that was possible for her with such severe disease, I knew that there were so many other people with earlier stages of the disease where we could prevent them from ever even getting to that point. And over again, I've seen this. I've had 2 patients in the last 6 or 8 months who've come in with a MoCA score of 8. So pretty severe cognitive decline,
Yeah.
diagnoses of Alzheimer's. And both of them nearly doubled their MoCA scores to 16 or 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with getting their sleep dialed and getting on a CPAP and wearing that consistently. Of course, the diet, the hormones, the exercise, all of the other pieces. But, these are things that even 5 or 7 years ago, I would have not thought they were possible. And my patients prove me wrong all the time in the best possible ways.
Yeah, it is so amazing. And, you think, well, 2 to 7, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes a huge difference. We've seen people, regain their continence and regain their ability to speak, regain their ability to take care of themselves. I mean, these are huge changes, become more interactive. One of the most common things I hear from the spouses is, oh, they're so much more engaged. Like they're part of the family again. They're interacting. And it really does show you this is about support for these synapses that are now functioning again. And you're actually, interacting with the person. The person is back, she's back or he's back, which is always wonderful to see. So Heather, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled by what you've set up at Marama, by what is now coming at Clear Mind and the future, which is going to be marvelous. And I know you've got patients coming up this afternoon and time at Marama, et cetera. So we don't want to keep you too long. But again, grateful for all your tremendous industry, your tremendous courage, and your expertise in setting this up. And congratulations. I look forward to many, many more stories of people whose cognition has been improved because of you. So thank you, Dr. Sandison.
It's an absolute privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.